Rinpoche was anyway, that was such a big factor, such an important factor for Rinpoche's motivation. And many times we never actually finished the motivation. The motivation became the actual talk in one sense. But the motivation, essentially bodhicitta, was that's just who Rinpoche was, I think, just who he was. And yeah, so I don't really know where to start. Maybe the beginning is a good idea, but I think I'll just jump into a story, I think. So maybe I won't jump into a story, but just better get started. I think in the beginning in Copan, Rinpoche was very keen to teach. Actually, he was very inspired to teach, and he started with a very small group. So I think in 1970 he started with a small group starting to teach Lamrim, and then Rinpoche himself was quite surprised or shocked at how well it was received, and so then Rinpoche started to teach regularly. And that became the beginning of the November, what we call the November courses, the 1 month November course that is in fact introduced so many people to the Dharma, so many of us, so many Sangha have been introduced to Buddhism, to Dharma, to the FPMT through that November course, 30-day retreat with Rinpoche teaching. That course has been hugely successful, still continues, and it will continue even with Rinpoche not here. But so many people came to that course, and after 1 month, their lives changed. Many times dramatically changed, and gave people meaning, some purpose for their life, which many didn't have before, it seems. For me anyway, it was that case. And I don't think that was unusual. And then from there, students would go back and to their own countries, and there would be nothing there, and then they would start with maybe some friends talking about the experience they had, and before you knew it, there was like a little kind of a study group. So that's what happened in Australia, I think, with I think the first centre to start was at Chenrezig Institute, and we had Nick Rebush and Yeshi Kadro who went back from their first course and talked to their friends about Dharma and how much of a change how much it had affected them, and that led to the start of the first centre in Australia, Chenrezig Institute. Nick and Yeshi Kadro did come back to Nepal soon after, and they were among the first group that were ordained, monks and nuns. So that was probably around 1973, 72, 73, when the first group of monks and nuns were ordained and started. And with Nick, he was very passionately involved in recording Rinpoche's teachings and Lama Yeshe's teachings. And that was actually the beginning, an important thing that happened in the beginning of FPMT was monks and nuns were being ordained, and they had some time. So a lot of especially in the beginning of FPMT, a lot of work was actually done by monks and nuns in different ways. For example, I think at the beginning of Chenrezig Institute, there was donated by 4 students, Nick and Yeshi Kadro, Tom, Victor, and Kathy. They donated 160 acres in Queensland, Australia. And so the Lama Yeshe wanted to start the centre there, which was called Chenrezig Institute. And it was interesting, prior to doing anything on the 160 acres, next door in a place called Diamond Valley, was organised a Copan-like course. It was in a place called Diamond Valley, and about 200 people came from around Australia. In those days, they were mostly like hippie kind of people, hippie style, and quite easy to live in the bush with nothing. 200 of them in a little valley. Cooking was outside, living was outside, teachings was in a tent, etc. like that. That was early 1970s. So that course happened for 1 month outside in the bush, Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, Rinpoche teaching most of the time. And then the Lamas left, and they left one Canadian nun named, I forgot her name. One Canadian nun, what's her name? Anyway, she was left there. Oh, that's really bad, getting her name temporarily. Anyway, Anne. So she was a very tall Canadian nun. I think she was taller than me. And so she was left on 160 acres to start the centre. You're talking in the Queensland bush, right? It's right sort of out the back, and it's real bush. And so she was left there to start the centre. And there was something was quickly improvised on the land, a little tin shed, and that was enough just to fit a barrow, a wheelbarrow, and a couple of shovels, a pick, things to dig the ground with, and mix cement with. So there was that little tin shed, and it was probably about 6 feet by 6 feet. It had, the floor was the earth, the grass, and Anne slept in there with the tools. That was the only thing on the property. And there she was, ready to start Chenrezig Institute. And she would get the wheelbarrow out, mix some cement, cut things down. That's how it started, Chenrezig Institute. It was 50 odd years ago. And the beginning of Chenrezig Institute, the first centre, by Anne. That was her first job. It wasn't the only job she ever. After that, after starting that, then she continued pioneering in other areas. So there was a lot of monks and nuns in those early years who was, because they had the time, I think partly that, and Lama Yeshe had them close by, they were asked to start things, do things, help, organize, whatever. So in the early days, and for some time, I think monks and nuns were quite critical in the beginning of FPMT. And I think in that process, not all those monks and nuns are still monks and nuns. I think a number of them, because they were in the West in those early times, starting centers, organizing whatever. I think that for one reason or another, because in those days, like in the 70s, early 80s, not so common to see a monk or a nun walking around the street in the West, down the road in California or in Paris. And you can get some interesting comments because they're not sure who you are, what you are. You know, usually it was, oh, Hare Krishna. That's right. It was Hare Krishna in the beginning. So I think a number of them either just gave back their robes or one reason or another. Anyway, the number didn't last. It wasn't easy, but you could say it was for a very good cause anyway. So the beginning of IMI was there was a lot to do. There was really a lot to do. Lama Yeshe was very ambitious, very keen. He had something in mind in terms of starting an organization which was a network of centers in order to teach the Dharma. And I remember that in my first very early days of being a monk, Lama Yeshe found me in the Gompa, Kopang Gompa, and I was trying to memorize 4 lines of Tibetan, a verse in Tibetan. Beside me, I had maybe a 6-year-old monk. They're mostly around 6 years, 8 years old, and so I'm trying to memorize. And Lama told me to get out, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm trying to memorize. He said, "That's not your way." He said, "Westerners, you've got to do something different approach." So he set up the monks and nuns at that time in the, there was a little building on Kopan Hill called the Astrologer's House. It was the only building in the beginning when Lama Yeshe got the land. At Kopan, there was a small building called where the King's Astrologer, he lived, just a small building. So Lama and Rinpoche stayed in one room and then the best room in that place was by, I don't know, Zena. She had the best room, I think. And then Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe shared one small room. And then gradually it evolved. And they moved out to when they built a small Gompa. And then Lama Yeshe had Sangha, Western Sangha, move in to the astrologer's building. And in the main room, at that time, there was maybe about 25 monks and nuns who'd been ordained. And then Lama set us up with a schedule. We had to do, starting at somewhere around 4 or 5 in the morning, we had Giorgio puja, prostration, 35 Buddhas, etc. And then after that, there would be breakfast. Then there was, then we had, I think it was study in the morning, and then lunch, and then karma yoga in the afternoon, and then a form of sort of discussion, debate in the evening. So that was the first program for IMI Sangha, actually. And then Lama Yeshe wanted us to be very independent in doing this. And we had to also cook for ourselves. There was almost, I think, no money at all, really. I think one or two people might have had some money, individuals, but we had to cook for ourselves, do everything. And essentially, as Lama said, we had to look after each other. Right? While the monks and nuns on the top of the hill, just above us, they did the sort of traditional Tibetan style way. And you know, the food was very, very basic. I think like bread for breakfast, and if we were lucky, butter and jam, very lucky. Tea, and then we'd take turns in cooking. Then one day, actually, and we had a gegu, you know, a disciplinarian. His name, he was from Chicago. Scott Brusso, he was an American monk from Chicago. So he was the first gegu. And so he had to keep the discipline, which wasn't easy sometimes. So one day, it became, there was one Sangha refused to cook, saying, giving some excuse, but it wasn't holding up. So Scott, the Gegu, he went upstairs to talk to Lama Yeshe about this. This was a very serious matter. Nobody was cooking. Anyway, Lama Yeshe was in sort of Scott from Chicago, explained to Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was looking in disbelief that somebody was refusing to cook for the Sangha. So Lama Yeshe apparently grabbed his robes and he said to Scott, he said, "You tell them, do they know what these robes mean? These robes mean to serve sentient beings," said. And Lama started to cry with tears. He just kept holding his robes. He said, "The meaning of the robes is to serve sentient beings." And he had tears in his eyes. So anyway, that did have an effect on everybody. So we didn't last very long there because actually, as we still do, there was visa issues. The longest period of time we could stay in Nepal was 5 months. And we were trying different things, and Rinpoche went to, I think, some important people's place, Nepalese people's place, influential people, trying to negotiate on behalf of the Western Sangha for, you know, if they could somehow help with getting longer visas, but it didn't work. And so the crunch came and we all had to leave. So Lama Yeshe said, I think go to Dharamsala and because we have centre starting there, Tushita. And then there was also the library where at that time Geshe-Nawan Dagi was teaching. So that he said, good to go there and stay together as much as you can as Sangha and try and live there. So we had to pack up all the belongings and carry that with us, including the library of quite a collection of Dharma books by that time. So we had about 8 big tin boxes of, you know, you see in India these like big trunks they're called actually, and they're tin metal boxes. So we had 8 of them filled with Dharma books, and everybody had something to take. So myself and one German monk, Helmut, we had the job of taking 8 trunks of Dharma books. So we, I think the Sangha didn't travel as one group. I don't know where, everybody sort of split up, I think, somewhere on buses and trains to get to Dharamsala. And so Helmut and I, we were able to get a bus down to the border, the Nepalese border, and then get across the border and then get on another bus with all these 8 trunks and get to Gorakhpur, a couple of hours drive by bus. And we arrived about midnight at the train station in Gorakhpur. And there's still, you know, I don't know, you have still 12 hours or 15 hours, depending on train, to get from Gorakhpur to Delhi. And then you have to change over from Delhi up to Pathankot. Then from Pathankot, you get a bus to Dharamsala. So it's quite a trek with 8 trunks. So we arrived on the station around midnight, Gorakhpur, and there was a train in already, actually. And so Helmut raced ahead and got the tickets. And in those days in India, you had 3rd-class tickets in the train. So they're quite cheap, but pretty rough. It's kind of pretty rough. And not always you get a seat. Anyway, so he got the tickets. He was at the other end of the station, and he was yelling to me. I was with the trunks, 8 trunks. So he was yelling to me to get on the train because the train started to move. And then he jumped on. I could see he jumped on in the front of the train. So the only thing I could do was, as the train started to move away along the platform, I was opening up the door and throw in a trunk. Then the next carriage came along and I opened up the door and throw in another trunk. And finally, by the end of the train, it was lucky we got all 8 trunks on the train, and I jumped on the last carriage. It was moving off the platform. The only thing is that I was hanging on the last carriage, but the door wouldn't open. So I was holding on as best I could on the outside of the train. I had my rucksack on the back, and so the trucks, the train is going off along, picking up speed, and I'm wondering how to get into the train. The door's locked. I don't know why the door was locked. Anyway, and I was a bit worried about posts, if my rucksack would get hit by post or something like that. But so anyway, not to make this too long, I managed to get around in between the train and then between the carriages, which was looked a bit life-threatening, actually. So then I got on top of the carriage, like a lot of Indians do, and I sat there with my rucksack, and we were heading off to Delhi. It was around midnight. Then I'd start to think to myself, you know, what about if we go through a tunnel? So then I laid down on the carriage roof, hoping that my rucksack would be okay. Anyway, to make the story a bit shorter, after a few hours, I went back down in between the carriages, and then luckily we came to a train stop, and I got off and got inside the train, and then started trying to go through the train to find Helmut with the 8 carriages, with the 8 trunks. And so I finally found him. He had all the 8 trunks, and he was very upset. He said, you know, we had no seats, and he had to move all these trunks by himself, and he was just really upset. And I was just so happy to be inside the train. Anyway, so finally we got to Dharamsala, and the other monks and nuns were also there, and we were able to rent rooms in the library, what they call the library in Dharamsala. And from what I remember, actually, I think we had one room we rented for monks and one room for nuns. I think it was ₹1 a day for each room. And I know that we had 8 or 9 monks in one room, and maybe similar amount of nuns in another room. So it was quite, it was full. It was full. And so we were attending classes in the morning with Geshe Nawandagi, and then sometimes we'd have classes, more private classes in the afternoon with Geshe Nawandagi, who was very kind. And at the same time, we were looking for a more permanent place to stay in Dharamsala. It's getting a bit long, isn't it? Anyway, I better finish this up. So we couldn't find any place to live, and of course we have very little money. But I think it was His Holiness Serkon Sencha Rinpoche, I mean the previous one, suggested that we go in front of the Guru Rinpoche statue in His Holiness's temple and pray in front of Guru Rinpoche there to find a place for the monks and nuns. And so we did that. We went, I think we were going there each afternoon and doing prayers standing in front of the Guru Rinpoche statue. Then one afternoon or one morning, I can't remember, I met an Indian lady who was living in Dharamsala. Sunita, her name was. And she said, she heard what we were trying to do. In those days, there wasn't too much shops or activity in McLeod Gunj, but she said, I have something maybe I can rent to you, and then quite cheap. So she took me down to it was the hill, the hill or the mountain, small mountain above His Holiness, between McLeod Gunj and His Holiness's temple. And so it was cow sheds. There was this row of cow sheds, and they're quite run down. And then she said, I can rent these to you. And I looked at it and I thought, this is interesting. So I had a word with Nick Rebush, because Nick and I were figuring this out. So we thought, okay, we'll give it a shot. So we rented the cow sheds and started to fix them up, because they were just stones on top of stones and walls that had sort of fallen down, and a roof that was really quite poor, barely a roof. There was no water, no electricity, just so we got together. We got water pipes and got pipes from above us and ran the pipes down to the sheds where we were, so that we have water. And then we got electricity down to there, and then we fixed up the walls. And then we still had mud floors, but then we would have these stones with mud and tin roof, and then we made just planks like a wooden bed, and that was it. And then we had, it wasn't too bad, but there was a lot of mice, rats, and then there was a lot of snakes chasing the mice and the snakes, the mice and the rats. So you'd often have mice coming out of the walls, mice, and then snakes following them. Often you would see snakes, that mice was their lunch or dinner, which was, for new monks and nuns, was a little bit freaky watching this going on. Anyway, so that was where we called it, it became known as the Inji Gompa in Dharamsala. It became known as the Inji Gompa, and that's where we lived for some time. Spending a long time here. Anyway, in one sense, that was the beginning of IMI Sangha. And what started to also happen is, I think monks and nuns were going to different areas in the West where they were key to starting Dharma activities like centers, etc., like that, like Elizabeth did with Vajrayogini Institute, and then also I think was key in helping start Nalanda. So I'm moving along because I think the next interesting thing I remember, next interesting thing was that Lama Yeshe really had this idea about having a Dharma celebration for the Western monks and nuns. I say West, I mean non-Tibetan monks and nuns. Lama Yeshe had this idea doing a Dharma, what he called a Dharma celebration. So it was interesting at that time also that many Tibetans, I don't know many, some Tibetans were sort of they would say to Lama Yeshe, like they were friends of Lama Yeshe, but they thought Lama Yeshe was wasting his time teaching Dharma to Westerners, non-Tibetans, right? It was interesting. They thought of, you know, just wasting your time, Lama Yeshe, teaching Dharma to Westerners. Westerners will never understand Dharma. Westerners, I mean non-Tibetans, right? That was an interesting thing that was coming up, and it's a bit hard to understand or believe that, but it was happening. So I think Lama was getting a bit of a hard time, a rough time because of that, Lama Yeshe. And but Lama Yeshe was very determined, right? And around, by this time, 1980, so I think it was around 1980, then there was maybe 200 monks and nuns, non-Tibetans. It could have been 200, close to 200 maybe. And Lama was really determined to show others that these monks and nuns could be good monks and nuns, and also were worthy of listening to the Dharma or hearing the Dharma. So I remember Lama Yeshe being very strict about how we would move around. We had to dress perfectly in our robes and always carry our chuga over the shoulder properly, and where possible move together, you know, not sort of like in a bunch, but sort of moved in a sort of an organized way, and sometimes even in a line. There'd be a long line of us going towards the teaching, coming back from the teaching. Anyway, by the end of the Dharma celebration, which was 2 weeks in Bodh and then 2 weeks in Dharamsala, Lama Yeshe was receiving apologies, you know, from his Tibetan friends. They were very impressed with what had happened. All these teachings that have gone on, how the monks and nuns had conducted themselves, how they behaved, how they appeared. They're a bit shocked, actually, quite shocked, and impressed. And I was there with Lama Yeshe, and there was one very influential Tibetan man came, and he apologized to Lama Yeshe. You know, he really apologized, and he was sort of quite not only apologizing, but he was, you could see he was sort of rejoicing in that this could happen, you know, that you know, that Dharma's going, could be practiced by non-Tibetans. He was, I think he was really rejoicing in that fact, you know. So that was quite interesting anyway. It was from the inside, it wasn't so organizing everything. It was quite a task, but anyway, at the end of the Dharma celebration, then we offered long life puja. This was sort of done. We offered a long life puja up in Tushita to Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe. Both sat together, and then we offered long life puja to Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, thanking them for everything that they did. So the long life puja finished, and everybody left. I mean, monks and nuns, and then Lama Yeshe called in Adrian Gatto, the Australian, tall Australian, Dr. Adrian Gatto, the Australian monk, and then he called in me and sat down. He sat us down and he started talking to us. And he was talking about the idea of a monastery in France. Because of this situation that was partly responsible from Elizabeth being able to get this building or this structure in France near to Vajrayogini Institute. And so Lama wanted it to be a monastery. Now, I don't remember exactly all the details because it was a long time ago, but Lama started to speak to the both of us about this, and then Lama Yeshe suddenly remembered something. There was a Geshe who'd come to Lama Yeshe just before the two of us came in, and he was asking for help, financial help for a monastery. So Lama Yeshe, it seemed like he just remembered that, and he said to me, quickly go to see Rinpoche and get his jola and bring it straight to me. And I wasn't sure what was happening, but so I said, now? And Lama Yeshe said, yeah, go quickly now, quickly. So I raced to Rinpoche's room and asked him for his jola, saying that Lama Yeshe wanted it. And so Rinpoche very quickly passed his jola to me, and I went back and gave it to Lama Yeshe. And then Lama Yeshe sort of, with some relief, pulled out the money offering from the long life puja. At the end of the long life puja, of course, everybody there had offered money offering to Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe. And of course, the first thing that Lama Yeshe does is take the money, because he's trying to do meaningful and useful things with it that's related to FPMT. But he was very worried, because whenever anybody asked anything of Rinpoche, he immediately gave whatever he had, right? And apparently Lama Yeshe just remembered that, you know, the money envelope, a big one, had gone into Rinpoche's jolas. And he remembered this Geshe was coming around asking for funds, and he suddenly remembered that if that Geshe gets to Rinpoche before he does, then the money's gone. So anyway, so anyway, that was just sort of a small interruption. Then Rinpoche said to Gyatso, he said, I think you should go to France and you you can be the director of Nalanda Monastery. And of course, Getzo was quite a bit shocked, I think, about this request, but he kind of reluctantly, well, he accepted anyway. He accepted, and then Lama said to me, he said, "Then you could be the look after the money. You can get the money for supporting the monastery." And I thought, oh, I see. That was also a bit of a, I wasn't sure what to do with that, but I accepted. So actually, we both went to Nalanda at that time. I can see Elizabeth can't remember that part. Anyway, we both arrived in Nalanda at that time, and it was sort of run down, but there's a workable situation. Anyway, I was only there 2 or 3 days because I had to look for some funds to support Getzo and the start of the monastery. So I went to, I couldn't do anything in France. I don't speak French. I went to England, and that didn't help. And then I decided the only way to go is go back to Australia and try to do something there to support the beginnings of the monastery. Actually, it's becoming quite long. How much, Tender, how much time do we have, or should I continue? Or
yeah, you can continue. I think we have still 35 minutes, so yeah. So you can continue, and or if you want to one time stop, then maybe people can ask questions. But yeah, we were previewing a 1.5 hour, so we're now 50 minutes into.
Okay. Anyway, I'll summarize a little bit now. So I ended up in Australia, and thinking of ways to generate some funds for Nalanda, and so then I've been out. I hadn't been working. I've been in India for 6, 7, 8 years. I forget. So I didn't know really where to start in Sydney, Australia. So in the end, I started a cleaning business, and I called it White Crow Cleaning. I called it White Crow because Lama Yeshe used to, I remember Lama Yeshe always saying, you know, a true Dharma practitioner is as hard to find as a white crow. That was some Tibetan saying. So I thought, oh, that's a nice name, White Crow Cleaning Services. And then there was so that started, and then I'd send the money back to support. I think there was Gatso, Geshe Jumpa Techok, Sherab from Kopan, who was Sherab, who was the translator. So that was sort of at the beginning of Nalanda. And so then also in Australia, in Sydney, there were a few other monks and nuns. Yeshe Kadro, there's 2 or 3 other monks, and they also they came along and cleaned, you know, and the idea was that if you clean in the evening, you know, offices or things like that, and then also you can clean houses in the daytime, nobody's around. So for monks and nuns, that's kind of, you work part-time, you support yourself, and you help support Nalanda at the beginning of that. So that started, and then I got a call from Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe said, as you're in Sydney, why don't you start a Dharma center while you're cleaning and the rest of it? So I said, okay, all right. So then I went and rented a house that was nearby, and it was quite a big house. And then Lama Yeshe said it would call it Vajrayana Institute. So we would clean. Cleaning was sometimes in the daytime, sometimes in night, and then also the cleaning supported the beginning of the center. Anyway, I'm going to jump now because there's too much of that. So I was actually working the director at Vajrayana there, and I got a call after a few years. I got a call from Rinpoche, who was just about to start a tour in Europe. I think that was 1986, and Rinpoche asked if I'd come to Holland, where he was about to go to start this European tour, and to help, like be the attendant. And so I said to Rinpoche, well, I'm doing this job in Vajrayana. So he said, just find somebody to take your place for 6 months while the tour was happening. So then I went to Holland, and that was the beginning of my time as Rinpoche's attendant. And it was a very, very, very unique experience, actually. Very unique experience. And with, Rinpoche, he was very different to Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was very outgoing, and Rinpoche was, when Lama Yeshe was around, Rinpoche was always like the perfect student or the perfect disciple. That was the aspect that he showed with Lama Yeshe. And it was really true. It was like, if you wanted to see how to conduct yourself in the presence of your guru, this was the perfect example. Yeah. And so but it wasn't actually, with Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe around, it wasn't always so easy. If I go back now to the early times in Kopan, in the very beginning time, I remember that Rinpoche said to me, he said, you should go to South India and study there with Song Rinpoche at Ganden Monastery. And I thought, oh. And then so I packed a little bag, and then I was walking out of the gate Kopan to go to South India, and then I heard a voice behind me, "Oi, where are you going?" And then I turned around, and it was Lama Yeshe. And I said, "Oh, Rinpoche told me to go to South India." He says, "No, you work, come back." So then there was this situation in the beginning there in Kopan where it almost was like Rinpoche would say one thing, and then almost always nearly after, Lama Yeshe would say the opposite. So my strategy was, whatever was said last, that's what I would do. So it would change, because you get different, not just me, I think there was others also who would get very different stories. Do this, no, do that. Anyway, So anyway, I started with Rinpoche in this first tour in Europe, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced, because Rinpoche never sort of really gave me the job. He gave me, after I arrived, a few days after I arrived in Holland, then there was Manjushri initiation, Manjushri Jaina. And so I'm supposed to be the attendant, right? So the attendant's supposed to know, to make the gektor, make the torma and everything else, and how to assist the Lama in the ritual. And I had really no idea what to do. Absolutely no idea. And Rinpoche wasn't sort of telling me what to do exactly. And then anyway, it was kind of interesting, because also my ego was there, like I can't look like I don't know what I'm doing. So I had to sort of get through this first Jainang. It was a Manjushri initiation. I had to get through that somehow, making a torma and etc. And then 3 days later was Vajrayini initiation. So that was a real major challenge, that one, the tormas. Anyway, so, and then Rinpoche's lifestyle was like, Rinpoche was, he never said no to anything in those days, especially. And I had no experience or no idea what my job was as attendant, and I had no introduction, and nobody introduced me. So people would be coming in to see Rinpoche just whenever they wanted. They just come straight in. Rinpoche would be eating food, come straight in. There was no structure around Rinpoche, nothing. And Rinpoche was not refusing anybody. He was very happy to receive everybody, and it went on literally day and night. On one occasion, it wasn't really necessary, but there was one student came through, opened up the window, came through the window at 3 a.m. I found them coming through the window at 3 a.m. in the morning to see Rinpoche. And Rinpoche was quite happy to talk with them and discuss. And even while he was eating, Rinpoche was eating, people would be coming in, talking, asking questions. I'd be standing there thinking, what am I supposed to do? So anyway, even at one stage, I think we were in Italy, and it was day and night like this, day and night going on. And Rinpoche, not the slightest, from Rinpoche's point of view, not the slightest problem. Happily receiving everybody, even with food, day and night. And remember, we were at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute, and then we had to move, drive to the next center, wherever it was. So Rinpoche got into the car, and everybody else jumped in the car and went off to the next center. But I was left there. And so then I had to hitch a ride to catch up with Rinpoche later at one of the centers. Anyway, there was, with Rinpoche in those days, and without having that structure, any structure at all around him, it was really literally, there was not the slightest bit of concern. He received people day and night, no matter what was happening. It was just very happily trying to please people for whatever they wanted, etc., like that. And at the same time teaching, of course, teaching going late, sometimes all night. so that was how it all started. Then in terms of Rinpoche touring, then of course that time without Lama Yeshe. So there was a small story in between. Rinpoche and I arrived, I think, at the border of Nepal and India. We got there by bus, I think. This was maybe early 90s, 1990 or something like that. We arrived at the border by bus, and then we got off the bus, and then there was a couple of suitcases and that which I was carrying, and we got across the border from India into Nepal. And then Rinpoche said Rinpoche seemed to suddenly get the idea that he wanted to go not up to Kathmandu, but somewhere else. So there was a bus, you know, one of those just normal sort of Nepalese buses, and he said, "Let's get on the bus." I said, "Rinpoche, you know where we're going?" And it would sound a bit strange, but Rinpoche said, "Get on the bus, get on the bus." So both of us got on the bus. I got the 2 suitcases somewhere, and we were sitting on the bus beside the driver. You know how the driver's driving like this, and then just on Nepalese or Indian buses over that side, you have a seat that faces the driver. So Rinpoche and I squeezed in there with 4 or 5 other Nepalese people, and the bus started. And the bus doesn't have a front windscreen, so the wind just comes blowing in. There's no windscreen in the bus. It doesn't have any glass windows. And it's night was coming, and we're driving along through the countryside. I mean, there's nothing there. It's completely dark now, and we're on a road. And I had no idea where we were going, and but Rinpoche seemed to know, although, you know, I was very unclear. And after a couple of hours, we were in the middle of nowhere, and then Rinpoche said, stop, tell the bus driver, stop here, we'll get off. And I said, Rinpoche, there's nothing here, and it's dark, there's no lights, nothing. We're in the middle of nowhere. And Rinpoche said, stop. So the bus stopped, and then I got the luggage off the bus, and the bus took off. And I don't know, it's like 9 o'clock at night, it's pitch black. There's no lights, there's no town, we're in the bush, as Australians would say, in the forest or in the bush. And I said, Rinpoche, where are we going? I mean, there's nothing here. And so Rinpoche was looking around for a while, and then he said, we'll go that way. So then he immediately walked off the road into the bush. And then, so I followed with the 2 suitcases. I was kept saying to Rinpoche, where are we going? Rinpoche, there's no light, it's pitch black, there's no town. What's happening? And Rinpoche just kept walking, stumbling and walking through the forest. Now we're through the bush, right? So, and I'm trying to catch up with 2 suitcases, and we come to a creek, a little creek, or you know. So Rinpoche, I mean, very agile in those days. You know, he's a Sherpa, so he just bounced down the side of the creek, jumped across the creek. And I came tumbling down with 2 suitcases, got across the creek and up the other side, and then we're going off in the forest. I said, Rinpoche, this doesn't make sense. And Rinpoche kept walking. He's not answering me. So anyway, after a while, there was looked like an electric light in the distance. And Rinpoche points his fingers, said, there, see? And I had no idea what we're doing. Anyway, we went closer and closer to the light, and it's a little village, and then we came to this monastery. And so this is the monastery of Chogyam Rinpoche near Lumbini. And I thought, I had no idea how Rinpoche did that, you know, where we got off in the middle of nowhere at night, and we went trekking through the bush, and we ended up at His Holiness Chogyam Rinpoche's temple. Anyway, we went into the temple, and Rinpoche asked if he could see Chogyam Rinpoche, but it was too late. It was too late, so they, the monastery monks gave Rinpoche and I a small room and said, you know, in the morning you sleep here, and in the morning you could, see Chogyam Rinpoche. So we went into, and it's summertime too, so it's very hot, really hot, really, really hot. So there was this very small room with 2 beds. So it's a little bit embarrassing for me because I want to go to sleep, right? Rinpoche is not at all into that. So he was sitting on his bed doing his prayers, and then I had to sort of in a very shy way, sort of gradually lay down and go to sleep, which is, you know, quite awkward for me. Anyway, and then there was lots of mosquitoes, so you have to have there's a mosquito net. So I made sure the mosquito net was properly over Rinpoche because he didn't seem to care. And I left Rinpoche meditating, and then about a couple of feet away, I sort of slipped into the bed very shyly and went to sleep with the mosquito net. Then in the middle of the night, I woke up, and there was Rinpoche. He'd taken the mosquito net off, and he had taken off his donka and his singlet, and there was just a mass of mosquitoes all over his upper part of his body, just feeding off his body. It was like hundreds, it was just like a mass of mosquitoes all over his body, and I was shocked. I thought, oh my God, what's happening? And I said to Rinpoche, you can't do, you know, anyway, I just didn't know what to do. But Rinpoche refused the mosquito net. He says it's just a little bit of blood to each one. He says, small offering, it's no problem. So I kept saying to Rinpoche, but Rinpoche, you know, you could get malaria or something like this. No, it's okay, it's okay. So I had to leave Rinpoche there with this mass. I mean, really so many mosquitoes on his body, upper part of his body. And that was Rinpoche's sort of offering. Anyway, so then next morning, Rinpoche was able to see Chogyam Rinpoche. So that, anyway, I jumped back to that story for some reason. But I think that was, Rinpoche's lifestyle was very, I think there was a period for many years in the earlier times where Rinpoche was like, he was like the real ascetic Lama, the real ascetic practitioner, where he manifested complete renunciation. There was no 8 worldly dharmas. There was, you know, if you didn't offer Rinpoche a cup of tea, if you didn't offer Rinpoche food, he wouldn't ask, he wouldn't take. You know, it literally, you had to put it in front of Rinpoche, and then he would take a long time to offer it. If you didn't offer a tea or whatever, Rinpoche, there was that period of time that he just not interested in it. so as far as I could see, it went on for several years in the earlier times where I don't remember Rinpoche ever asking for anything. And he never, he never went to bed, right? He never took off his robes. After a couple of weeks with insistence, Rinpoche would take a shower, but put his robes back straight on. He never entered the bed ever in his lifetime. And I was with him like basically every day. He never went, never went to bed and he never took his robes off and put his pajamas on and slipped under the covers. Never. You know, always he had his robes on properly and sat there on his bed doing his prayers, sometimes leaning back on the wall, etc. like that, doing his prayers, mostly meditating, and that was it. You know, never ever, right up to the time Rinpoche passed away, I never seen Rinpoche take off his robes for any other reason except when you sort of pushed Rinpoche around 2 weeks. Please, Rinpoche, have to have a shower, have to have a wash. So, you know, that sort of aspect of asceticism, being an ascetic, but in many ways, it was like there was no thought. There was no thought of an I that had himself as something of value or importance. I don't know. Anyway. It was just very. He was a real ascetic practitioner. He was like, yeah. It was anyway. It was quite. It was quite challenging and quite powerful. Being around that kind of practice, that kind of being, who was just displaying what a pure Dharma practitioner was. And then I think part of it was Rinpoche was always doing observations, right? Because I think that was sort of, it seemed like a commitment. Rinpoche would never, he would always do a mo for everything, actually. 2 times, I think 2 times I remember, and Rinpoche mentioned to me he was doing a mo. He said, I don't know whether I asked him or anyway, he was doing a mo where he had his hand, right, holding the mo box and then the dice, about to drop it. And he said he was checking to whether he should live or die. And he's just about to drop the dice. I said, Rinpoche, why are you doing that? And Rinpoche so he dropped the dice and I nearly fell over. Oh, he says it comes out to continue. So 2 times I've seen that happen. 2 times where just at the drop of a dice, Rinpoche's thing was continue to live or not, beneficial to live or not, and then do the dice. There was one time in Hong Kong where we were staying in an apartment of some students on the top floor in Hong Kong, and at that time we got a telephone call, because in those days you had telephones, but you didn't have the internet and the rest of it. So it was a telephone call, somebody speaking at the other end from the US. So it was somebody calling from Santa Cruz, and they said that there was the opportunity to buy land for the center here in Santa Cruz. That was to become land of medicine Buddha. So Lama Yeshe in his time had bought this land and wanted it especially for universal education. But after some time wasn't able to keep it. It was just didn't work financially. So it was sold. And then it was a spiritual group that bought it. And then maybe 1 or 2 years later, that group couldn't make it work either. So they wanted to sell. So this was one of the students in the area of Santa Cruz was calling Rinpoche and said to me, can you please ask Rinpoche if we should buy land of medicine Buddha? I mean, this land again. And I said, oh, really? I said, it didn't work before. And they said that they think it will work. It would work this time. And they said it's $1 million. I said, well, in those days, that was $1 million. It's a lot of money. I said, are you sure? And they said, yes, sure. So I was on the phone and Rinpoche was right across the room, standing up. And I asked Rinpoche, I said, there's somebody on the phone and they're seriously wanting to see if we should buy land of this property again. And it's $1 million. They want Rinpoche to do a mow. So Rinpoche immediately kicked his foot up and his slipper went sailing through the air right across the lounge towards me and landed on the floor. And Rinpoche said, bye. And I said, what, Rinpoche? He said, bye. I said, no, Rinpoche, they want you to do a mow to see if they should buy or not. And Rinpoche said, I did. Look, the slipper landed the right way up. I said, Rinpoche, be serious, please. This is a property worth $1 million and they want you to do a mow. He said, I did the mow and the slipper landed the right way up. Bye. So that was it. So that was the answer. Actually, I remember one time that we were at Root Institute and His Holiness was visiting and came to visit Root Institute and was doing some activity there. And then, of course, Rinpoche led His Holiness into the Gompa and was moving along the front of the Gompa, just introducing things to His Holiness. And so Rinpoche was standing in front of the Gompa, and then His Holiness was right behind Rinpoche, and then I was right behind His Holiness. And then His Holiness said to Rinpoche from behind Rinpoche, His Holiness said to Rinpoche, oh, Rinpoche, he said, this is your predecessor. This is your predecessor. He said that sort of kind of quietly to Rinpoche, but I could hear from behind Rinpoche. And Rinpoche was looking at the altar directly in front of a statue of Geshe Potawa. And His Holiness was saying, His Holiness said to Rinpoche, oh, Rinpoche, this is your predecessor. So I always remember that. Maybe Tender, maybe that's, I think I've gone an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe we have to invite you for part 2 in the future.
But
Yeah, so thank you so much. You have very unique life as a monk and being attendant of a holy being. Thank you so much for sharing. I've only one question, like you deal day in, day out with a holy being who wants to serve sentient beings, and then does not need seemingly sleep, does not take showers, so quite unconventional. And then you as Westerner, you have a conventional mind. So, and then, for example, with the shower, you ask Rinpoche maybe once in the 2 weeks, please take a shower. So what were your guiding principles, like for keeping students away, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche seemingly wants to serve sentient beings 24/7, allowing interviews. But what is your guiding? How difficult was it, or what made you sometimes just come in with conventionalities?
well, I was very I was very much part of the 8 worldly dharmas, so therefore it was a problem. It was a real problem because my mind was always in the 8 worldly dharmas. So being around such a person, such an example, such a practitioner, then that those 8 worldly dharmas became even more noticeable and more challenging. So it's it's really difficult. It's really hard because it just becomes much more noticeable, much more obvious how your mind is reflected, not reflected, how your mind is. You see your mind much more easily. At least it was my experience that you see your mind much more easily. And it's all you get is the 8 worldly dharmas, self-cherishing. And that's what you're always confronted with. And because Rinpoche's lifestyle is quite full on, then that pressure doesn't let up. So it's difficult, but it's a real blessing at the same time. So like one example, another example anyway. At Vajrapani, we were at Vajrapani one time, and it was Rinpoche finished teaching. Maybe he was giving the commentary of Most Secret High Agreement, could have been. It was early 90s, and Rinpoche was staying in the what they call the Geshe house. So the teaching finished, and then Rinpoche went back to retire, and of course I followed. And then the Geshe house is very small, just has one bedroom and then one little kitchenette. Rinpoche was in the bedroom. Then I would sleep in the lounge, on the lounge, like that. So Rinpoche came in, sat on the lounge by bed. It's about 11:30 at night or something like that. And so Rinpoche sits on the lounge. I think maybe then I said, Rinpoche, like a cup of tea? And she said, yes, let's have a cup of tea. So I made a cup of tea, offered to Rinpoche, and then Rinpoche started chatting, talking. So 11:30, 12, 12:30, 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m., Rinpoche still talking, finished his tea. And 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m., still Rinpoche's talking. Now, if Rinpoche was saying something, what the conversation appeared to my ordinary mind like nothing important. It was just sort of talking about this and that. There was no teaching, nothing like that. It was just Rinpoche's just talking to me, and my mind started to say, "Oh, couldn't we do this tomorrow or something, or after breakfast?" I was thinking in my mind, right, like, no, because I want to go to bed. But Rinpoche is sitting on the bed, my bed, just a very relaxed way, not seeming to have anything really meaningful to say, but just chatting with Roger. So 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30. Rinpoche is still chatting about this and that, and my mind's, really starting to freak out, like I, pull me. Self-cherished mind's going crazy, right? Literally going crazy. Just saying, I wish Rinpoche would finish. I wish Rinpoche would finish. I mean, we could talk about this tomorrow. Why do we have to talk about this tonight? It's so late. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I. So, I think that evening, around 5 or 5:30 or 6, I don't know, I can't remember what time it was, but it was close to breakfast time. Rinpoche said, okay. So then he finished and he went into his room. But, and I mean, I'm sort of exhausted, out of it. And, but, my self-cherishing mind had been giving me such a hard time all through the night. I mean, and so those sort of situations, I didn't manage that situation. Let's be clear. I really didn't manage that situation. My self-cherishing mind, my 8 worldly dharmas, my mind went to town on me. Literally I was just overwhelmed by my self-cherishing mind and the 8 worldly dharmas, and this constant I, poor me, I. And so in one sense, if you were in the right frame of mind, it was like such a perfect teaching. Rinpoche wasn't saying anything about Dharma, but you can be 100% sure, guarantee, that was intentional from his side. It was just a great teaching that unfortunately I never got. It was just, I was just beaten up by my own mind, totally destroyed by my own mind. But it was a perfect teaching. And then that's often those situations would happen, right? It would, and Rinpoche was perfect. He could manage these situations so well. I mean, he could just beat up your self-cherishing mind so well. It was, he had it down perfect. Yeah. Oh, Tender, did that answer the question?
I think it's a good answer. It's a good answer, yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. Anyway, I think that for us it's unimaginable how difficult such a task is. So, yeah. Thank you. So, yeah, I think Nalanda of IMI exists 50 years. I think you covered a little bit stories from 70 to maybe 85. So maybe we should do a follow-up one time, because I think you have many more stories. But very inspiring, your life as attendant of Rinpoche and your life as monk. So, yeah, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank Nalanda staff and IT club. So, Chandru, Joey, and I would like to translate us. Venerable Siliana, wherever you are, Venerable Paloma, also in Spain, and Venerable Jimpa, thank you so much for your flexibility. It's so great to have these translators. Also, many times I forget to arrange, and then at the last moment, 1 or 2 days before, they're always still willing to translate, make gaps in their agenda, so make it possible. So yeah, so the IMI, the exact date that IMI started, according to the archive, is December 15. So that will be day we try to organize a few different talks all over the day, in order that Americans and Australians and Europeans and Asians can all attend at least a part of the day, because a worldwide organization, it's very difficult to organize one activity with everyone present. So we will do that day a few different talks. So it will be December 15, and in between we also different countries will celebrate Nalanda with their own students and teachers and Sangha, like in the UK, like in Spain, and maybe some other places. So yeah, as we are part of the whole FPMT, and I think it's nice if we are in service of the FPMT and the service of the students, so that we stay a bit in touch with what we are doing, and yeah, celebrate 50 years that it exists, 50 years of service of so many generations, and was established by Lama Yeshe. So thank you also very Chucky that I'm not alone here. So it's quite helpful. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think that's it. And here is we are here in Europe and Africa and Asia. We have the lunar eclipse. So I think the highlight is about in a half an hour or 40 minutes. So it means, according to also the advice of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the karma, I don't know, 40,000 times stronger or 400,000. At least all the karma is much 100 strong. Who knows exactly? 700,000 times stronger. So here after this session, so I'm going to do here at least a recitation, because it's one of the advice. You can also meditate on bodhicitta according to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice, or meditate on emptiness, or read one of the other sutras. But there's one specific was also the names of Manjushri. So to do this also, to use this powerful energy for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And also this session I want to dedicate yeah, to the long and healthy lives of all our teachers, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the swift return without any obstacles of Rinpoche, so that yeah, we may all his students, everyone who had connection with Rinpoche, can again connect, and yeah, without any obstacles. So we also can dedicate it for our own future, that we are always able to serve the holy teachers and serve each other as monks and nuns, and serve all the lay community, be of inspiration, and bring others to enlightenment. That it's not only theory, but that it's also something from the heart. So, and then of course we dedicate for the Lama Tsongkhapa tradition, that is successful on this planet, that many people have the opportunity to study, and we dedicate, of course, for world peace, for peace in the hearts of all presidents, everyone who is responsible for governing the world. May they have wisdom in their hearts and not delusions. So may they have the attitude of serving all sentient beings, not only their family or themselves, their family or their kind, but also their neighbors and all surrounding countries and the whole world. So in this way, and then of course a good rebirth for everyone who is in the bardo. May they have precious human rebirth or a rebirth in the Pure Land. So, and then for all sponsors of IMI and for all our monastic communities like Nalanda, Institute Lama Tsongkhapa, Chenrezig, Raja Pamo, so all our monastic communities, Bendigo, Dayton so for the flourishing of Dharma, it really depends on ourselves. If the Dharma is still alive, it's not only dependent on lamas, it's also dependent on how much we invest in the continuation of Dharma on this planet. So thank you everyone for being with us. I see many, also everyone on the online. I see very nice familiar faces. Thank you. I hope you all do well. So it's very nice to be connected, even if it's sometimes a bit impersonal online. But yeah, these days we have not so much big retreats with His Holiness or Lama Zopa Rinpoche retreat. Here and there in Kopan, we might meet with a bigger group or in Tushita, but it's very nice that we are here together, so hope to see you next time. And next Saturday we will try to organize a 24-hour marathon of the Manjushri, chanting the names of Manjushri, mainly. So to do it for 24 hours with all monks and nuns all over the world. So I hope all Sangha or communities will participate next week and try to make it work. And for the swift return of, especially of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. But we can dedicate it to all things which is according to the Dharma and is living in our heart. So, okay, thank you so much, and au revoir, adieu, see you next time. Ciao, ciao.